Now it is after the third meat press. So I'm coming back with a Alpha Plus show because there's also another interesting thing that Andrew here wanted to talk about. So I guess the question that kind of brought up this whole topic was, what are new areas of research that are interesting to you?
So one of the things that I'd hope to talk about was macrobiotics. And macrobiotics, it's the idea that there is an ideal, and ideal is a little bit fuzzy, gut flora.
Right.
And so if anybody's not familiar with the term gut flora, your small intestines, large intestines, all that, they are not full of bacteria, but they have many bacteria living in them. And they're important.
Right.
If you give somebody really strong antibiotics and kill off all of their gut flora, they get all sorts of problems. Usually it's malnutrition, that sort of thing.
Ooh.
Because the things that those microbes are doing are important to your digestion. So if they're not taking a first pass at some of the things you eat, your gut isn't able to absorb the minerals and nutrients that it needs.
Right.
So it's actually really important that you have the right microbes in your stomach. Now, that's where things start to get fuzzy.
Right.
Because it's going to vary a lot person to person. It's
Right.
going to vary a lot diet to diet. And nobody has a real good grasp on everything that's in there. There's been some research done on it, but I think that as of the last I heard at least, they were still at the cataloging and identification stage.
Okay.
So nobody really knows everything that's in there. And even if we figure out everything that's in one guy's gut, that's just one guy.
Right.
Other people might have other things.
And so that's going to range wildly on your parents. It's going to range on what you've eaten over the course of your lifetime. It's going to range on what you've been exposed to.
What kind of food you eat.
Right.
How often you eat it. All that. Yeah.
It might even have something to do, like if you've ever been sick in specific instances and your body reacts a certain way, that's going to change all of that completely.
Yep.
So that seems like that's a really wildly variant field in terms of research for that.
Yeah, it's an extension of microbiology, but it's very new. And in addition to not really having a good grasp on everything that's in there, you've also got the whole interplay between everything in there.
Right.
So we do know that there are times when something goes wrong. You can have, if something gets out of control, something says, hey, I'm going to grow all over this thing.
Right.
And then you can get all sorts of diseases if something gets out of whack. But in addition to not knowing everything that's in there, as of the last I heard, we don't know what the balance is.
Right.
It's kind of like a forest ecosystem or any other ecosystem where you've got a bunch of stuff running around, and unless you've done a bunch of study, you don't know who's eating what happens if there are too many of these guys, not enough of these guys.
Right.
Things can get out of balance. But the idea behind macrobiotics is that you can benefit from having different bacteria. So if you've got okay bacteria and you're not, let's say you're short on vitamin A or something,
Right.
and vitamin A is just arbitrary. I don't know enough about vitamin A metabolism and absorption to say that this is definitely how this works. I'm just using it as a hypothetical example.
Right.
Let's say you've got okay but not real good gut flora. Maybe they're only operating at 50% efficiency. Maybe you're only absorbing half of the vitamin A that you're eating.
Right.
And you really should be getting more than that. The idea behind macrobiotics is that you could give somebody a pill with the right bacteria, better bacteria in it, and that those bacteria would then live in their gut permanently,
Right.
and improve their digestion and absorption of vitamins and minerals.
That There seems like a lot of potential in that field.
Yeah. No, if you want to get into, and I don't think anybody's talking about actually doing this yet, but it's kind of a sci-fi idea. Strictly speaking, if you were to start playing around with some of those bugs, you could probably genetically engineer some of them to do more than they currently do.
Right.
So, let's say you're a diabetic and you no longer produce insulin. Strictly speaking, it might be possible to modify some of your gut bacteria to produce insulin for you.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. And then you don't need to go around and get shots all the time. You just have these little bacteria living in your, well, not your stomach, your intestines.
Right.
And they produce insulin. It gets absorbed into your intestines and gets into your bloodstream. Now, that's far off. That's a sci-fi idea at this point. But there's all sorts of stuff that you could potentially do with that.
I mean, sci-fi is only a matter of time before it becomes reality, as we've been finding out.
Some of it.
Right. So, all right. Another thing to be interesting about.
Yeah, no, probiotics are pretty interesting. I believe they first started doing research into them when they were during the space program. They were concerned about the astronauts maintaining good health and that sort of thing. So they started looking real close at them.
Right.
And one of the things they looked at the time, they were worried about killer bacteria from space, which the informed guys at the time said, we're pretty sure there are no killer bacteria from space. But nobody had ever been there.
Right.
And nobody was willing to say, I am absolutely sure that there are no killer lunar bacteria.
About to say, I wouldn't want to be that guy that was wrong.
How do you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to be the guy who said it was going to be fine and then they brought back the moon plague and killed everybody. So when they were doing that program, the space program, they started looking at this. And so they went to some bacteriologists, and this is a story I've been told. I can't definitely say it's true.
Right.
And they basically said, no one has the information you want. Because nobody had ever bothered to look at it before.
Right.
It's taking people's poop and seeing what's growing in it, basically. And, who wants to do that?
Right.
But it was a space program, and everybody wanted to help the space program, so they started on it, and they looked through their poop, see what was going in there, and made, as best they could, a list of what's going on in the person's gut.
Right.
And then they compared it with them later when they got back. And I think that there were some changes, but it wasn't any changes that they were worried about. It wasn't the lunar plague.
Right.
But yeah, no, I believe that's where the idea of macrobiotics got its start. Prior to that, it was, digestion isn't a thing that we've understood real well for that long.
No.
And we still don't have it entirely down. Like I was saying, how exactly some of these things get from chewed up food to good things in your body, some of it's a little bit fuzzy.
Right.
Now, maybe later you talk to some guy who studies specifically that, and he might be able to shed some more light on this.
Okay. That's definitely something I can try and do.
Okay.
Because topics like that definitely bring a lot of interest, or discussions like this bring a lot of interest to topics like this, and hopefully it'll bring a lot of change and research and development on these topics.
Also, I guess that there aren't that many people who come to talk to digestion scientists,
Yeah, that too.
so they might be happy to talk to you.
All right. Well, again, want to thank Andrew for being here. And
problem.
this is the Alpha 3 Plus show. See you next time.